Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Movie Film Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. It is episode 285, brought to you by Mr. Boy Productions. I'm Zachy, his son. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
You know, it's weird, Brian. You and I, exactly a week ago, we were occupying the same space.
I know. You came down to Los Angeles to visit, and we were all excited. We're like, you know what? I mean, we're in the same space. Let's record an episode together, right? And then we realized,
Really?
you know...
Well, yeah, it's like, hey, let's not. I was like, let's buck let's Last Jedi this and subvert expectations.
That's right. That way we were like, technically, well, it's a lot harder to record in person.
That's kind of what we realized, right? Yeah, weird.
Yeah,
weird
it was
how that
kind of weird.
works. But yeah, I figured last summer, you know, you drove up here so we could watch Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny together. I figured the least I could do was fly down there so we could watch Madam Web together.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that because I wanted everyone to know it wasn't all roses. So we ate our vegetables too.
Dude, you know what's funny? And we'll get to this later, but it really was, you know, I arrived like Thursday, early in the afternoon. And basically we spent Thursday and Friday putting off watching Madam Web. Right?
It was on the calendar for each day, and then we kept pushing it. And we're like, no, we will. We're gonna get to it. We'll get to it tomorrow.
So we have lots to say about that, but we'll save that. We'll save that for a bit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I cannot wait. I've been like sitting on this, you know, for the week. So.
But we did, you know, we got to revisit Everest while I was down there.
Yeah, that was a film I saw, you know, a couple years ago, and I just kind of forgot about it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah,
you know, but you know, our buddy Sean was over, and we were flipping channels, and I think it was just starting on cable, and we were just sort of settling in, like we had caught up, we had eaten, and we're like, oh, well, maybe we'll watch this, and so you're like, you know what, screw it, let's cue up Voodoo, let's go right back to the beginning, and let's start it from the start, and yeah, we went and climbed Everest, as it were.
So yeah, this is from 2015. It's directed by Baltazar Kormacher, and it is a movie. I at the time I reviewed it for Philly Weekly, and I really liked it. I had the experience of watching it in on an IMAX screen in 3D.
I can't even imagine.
Which is like vertigo inducing.
No, I have a memory of seeing it very big. I saw it with my buddy Michael. We saw it. I remember we went after work and went and caught that. And I remember it feeling large, but I don't think it was in 3D. That would feel, dizzying.
Yeah. But it is one of those, I think, like you said, like I mean, it's not really talked about that much, obviously, right?
Yeah. You know, I couldn't remember also if it was just sort of an experience film. Like, oh, see what it's like to climb Everest, or if it was a true story. Like, I honestly didn't remember when it started. And it's based on a true story, and you can imagine it doesn't all go well. And so it's I think a lot of times when you watch a movie like that, you're sort of hoping to see like the triumph of the human spirit or something. And really it's more like the mountain always wins is kind of what the movie is. And it's, you know, when it ends, you're like, wow, that was really good, but man, you know, it's right. Heavy. It's heavy.
Yeah, but it is, I bring it up only because like I've revisited, you know, maybe twice since it came out, so totally 3 times, but I've enjoyed it each time. I think it's incredibly gripping, great performances pretty much across the board. Jason Clarke, who is just one of those, like you plug him in, you're going to get a solid performance. This is one of his best performances. I think he's terrific in this movie.
Absolutely. I mean, not everybody can have that thing where it's like, that's a guy I'd follow into battle and he cares about me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but that is 100% what he's exuding in this. And it's really, it's something to watch. He's very good.
You know, a comparison, a favorable comparison I would make is, you know, the nut that you have to crack with this movie is that you have these people who are going up to Everest, taking an incredible risk upon themselves, and they're taking on that risk solely for essentially bragging rights, right?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that's so now they go up there, and then things get difficult, and suddenly now lives are at risk. And there's a part of you, I think, a not insubstantial part of you, that's like, well, why'd you go up there, you dummy, right?
I remember that's exactly how I felt the first time I watch it. Like, it's hard. Like when you're watching a sports movie and there's like a pitcher, and if he does one more throw, he could blow out his arm. You're like, man, that'd be so foolish, but I get it. You're on the mound. This is your last chance. That's one thing, right? But having a family and leaving them to just try to touch the top of a mountain, which I get, it is impressive, but it's also really the odds are against you coming back alive.
That's right.
And it's hard to look at it as heroic, and it's like, you can't, for me, I remember both times watching this, I sort of had that in the back of my mind, like, man, yeah, but what you're doing is dumb, like, I really hope you make it, and that would be impressive, but it is inherently dumb,
Yeah.
and kind of selfish.
Well, and I think that's why the Jason Clarke character, Rob Hall, ends up he's there doing his job, and he's trying to help these people.
Yeah.
And so I think you can relate much more to his particular predicament. But the comparison that came to mind is The Perfect Storm. Which is a film I don't particularly like, and fundamentally it's because of that, right? It's about this tragedy. It's about this real life event that happened to this fishing boat where everybody died. Sorry, spoiler, everybody died. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, well, you guys did a really stupid thing.
Yeah.
Everybody and their cousin told you don't go out there, and I just couldn't get over that hill, right? I mean, it's sad that they died, but I'm also like, dude, the captain, you did this to yourself, and you killed everybody who works with you.
You know what else I remember bothering me about that movie was I had not read the book, right? So I just went and saw the film. And I didn't know that everybody died. And then when that happened, I was like, wait, so we don't even know if the last half of that movie even happened?
Exactly. Right? That was my exact thought. Yeah. I was like, cause it ends with kind of this, like, Clooney sort of like sacrifices himself heroically kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. Yeah. Well, sort of. It's a little fuzzy, my brain.
Sort of, kind of. That's what comes to mind. Like, there's this. It's like this noble thing where he's like, he stays back and Wahlberg leaves and whatever. And it's like, well, whatever, man. Everybody died. We don't know if that's what actually happened. For all we know, Clooney strangled Wahlberg to death.
Right. And that was before the storm. It was like over a sandwich in the refrigerator.
Before they even went out there. Yeah.
And so by the way, I'm sorry. These are real people. No disrespect. I'm sorry.
Well, that's why I said Clooney and Wahlberg. Right?
Yeah. The character. Yeah.
The characters, My memory of The Perfect Storm I went to the AMC Barrington. It was opening night, biggest screen. I was sitting, front row center, packed room, and boy, was that the wrong movie to have like the king size.
Yeah, okay, but you need Dramamine.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah.
I think 3 times I was like, sorry, as I work my way to the aisle,
Oh man,
coming
what's
back.
Funny?
Sorry.
Have you ever been a front row person, like by choice?
Never by choice. No.
I'm fascinated. I went to a screening recently of something, and there were seats available, and I saw people go right to the front row, and I was like, man, no. Like, I remember I've had to do it a couple times back in the day, and I think now they're like constructing theaters to be a little more forgiving if you're closer to the front, but I'll never forget, I saw Gladiator front row. And in my memory of that movie is of it being really tall and distorted. Like, that is how it lives in my mind a little bit because of that experience.
So funny.
So yeah.
Well, first of all, if there's other seats and you go right there, you're a sociopath. Obviously, that's a red flag. If you have children, DCFS should be called. Clearly, there's something wrong there. But I remember in 2001 going to see the Planet of the Apes, the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes. And I was going with my cousins and my one idiot cousin. You always have that one cousin who's like, or person, fill in the blank, in your group, who's like, oh, the movie starts at 7, so we can just get there at, 6:55, right?
Right.
It's always that one person who screws it up for everybody. So that's what happened to me. By the time we got there, the whole place was filled, and it's just right there.
Yeah.
I'm sitting directly under the screen for Planet of the Apes. Now, granted, the movie turned out to be not great, but at that moment, I didn't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all I
Yeah.
knew is that my cousin had ruined that experience for me. So
And back in the day, before you could reserve your seats.
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
It
You had to be there,
was
get in line. Yeah.
it was a wild and uncertain territory back in
Yeah.
the day. What else though? You've been just like kind of delving back into the catalog. It feels like.
Yeah. Well, actually, I didn't put this on the list here, but I wanted to mention that I watched Tucker, The Man in His Dream, off your recommendation the other week.
Well, what'd you think? I'm very curious.
Well, okay, so I don't know if you could tell, but I've been sick and I'm still getting over it right now. So I was been forced to be on the couch and I've been looking for stuff to watch. And I was like, I remember Zach talking about Tucker. I just have a memory of that video cassette from the rental store it being in our house. Like, it's the only memory I've had of that movie. So I was like, let's put it on. And I didn't even remember what the tone was like. And man, this movie has a tone. This movie's like a little Cracker Jack, right?
That's right. Yeah.
It's like the score and the filmmaking and everything. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed it a lot. It's it's a little it's not particularly deep necessarily. It's like a little sizzle over digging into the man himself. That being automaker Preston Tucker, but it is just like a zippy little ride. I still feel like I kind of got the gist of the story. And I gotta say, it was one of the most pleasingly shot movies I've watched in a really long time. Like, I was absolutely dazzled by the filmmaking. And this is a movie that's just been slept on for decades. So I just wanted to co-sign what you said about Tucker. I really enjoy it. I'm glad you brought it up because I really enjoyed watching it.
Well, I should say it was recommended to me by Mark McGee, one of our listeners, and that's what lit a fire under me. So thank you, Mark, for doing that.
Yeah. Well, all right. Two more. So I watched Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Amazon series starring Donald Glover, like co-created by him. And, based on the film, starring Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, which was one of the first movies I ever worked on. So I was very curious. I literally got the first movie set I ever walked on was their house after it had been all shot up after their fight. So that was like my
amazing
intro into Hollywood. So I was very curious, Donald Glover and the things he's making these days, Atlanta and whatnot. Like, what is he going to do with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, right? And I have to say, I really enjoyed this series, and it's been interesting then to talk about it with people and see that people are kind of all over the map with it. So having said that, I'll just say the reason I kind of liked it was, there's so much, we're even past this topic now, but there's just so much quote unquote prestige TV that everything that comes out is prestige TV now. Like it all has the same look, like they know the tricks.
None of it is prestige TV.
Kind of, right? I mean, there's still the diamonds in the rough, but there's everything knows how to shoot a thing or color a thing with like muted colors and give it a certain score to make everything sort of feel like it's prestige TV. So I feel like less things are really worth checking out, but I feel like this one was worth it to me because this really did have a personality all of its own. And that's what I've been missing for a while from a lot of these shows that have been recommended to me. And it just had this really interesting, slightly off kilter tone that hooked me right away. And unlike the film, which is, the Jane and John Smith are already married and then they discover that they're spies working for competing agencies. And this one, they are put together, like, you are spies pretending to be a married couple. And over the course of all their missions, they're like, I think we're kind of in love with each other. So it's like really about the development of a relationship over the course of all this crazy spy action. And in a weird sort of way, it was almost like, like Scott Pilgrim or something, right? Where it's like equating the navigation of a relationship through a genre exercise. But what's interesting too is the show isn't always super spy focused. Like sometimes it's like more about what's happening between the spying and it really digs into like nuanced things that happen to couples in relationships, uncomfortable things and arguments and sometimes the uglier side of things. And how do you recover from that? And I don't know. I was pretty hooked by it, and I got through it in like 2 days. And right up to the end, I felt like it was marching to its own beat, and I really appreciated it, especially for that reason. So I don't know. I personally would recommend it if that sounds interesting to people. So I just wanted to give that a shout out.
Well, you've got credibility on the subject of Mr. and Mrs. Smith because you know you're one of the makers of the original. So
Yeah, wow. You put it that way. It's pretty cool. Just a little fact. I've probably said this on the show, but the poster, it's kind of, you see it everywhere on DVD. The white background with the two of them back to back. I was literally behind the camera for that, so that was kind of wild. But
I remember when you were working on that movie, and you, at this point it's been like 20 years, but so I don't think this is telling tales out of school. I remember you telling me like, I think Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are dating.
Yes, I did know, and eventually at some point I knew for a fact that was happening, because of friends that worked on the movie and they were in charge of the hotels. So
there you go.
Yeah, and I remember that being like, well, I'll be damned. And and then I remember, I have a memory of a year later, I was working on another movie and I was in the office, and I remember someone coming into the office with like an Us Weekly and going, "You'll never believe it, Brad Pitt broke up with Jennifer Aniston." And I was like, "Oh, here it goes."
You were there. You were a witness to history.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It is kind of crazy that it's something that still gets referenced even, you know what I mean?
The whole breakup with Jennifer Aniston and stuff.
Yeah. But anyway.
But what else, man?
Okay, so this is digging back a little bit, but I watched a documentary called The Decline of Western Civilization, which is a music documentary directed by Penelope Spheris, right? Who is probably most famous for directing Wayne's World. And so I was listening to a podcast where she was being interviewed, reminiscing about the making of Wayne's World. And basically she said, I think the reason I was chosen as director is because of my rock documentaries, Decline of Western Civilization 1 and 2. And there's a third one also. And I was like, I'm just curious what that's all about. So I wanted to see, I think Wayne's World to this day is still a perfect comedy. I mean, it's one of those movies that, despite, being like 30 some years old or whatever it is, it's like, it holds up staggeringly well in terms of its content and its execution. It's just one of those miracles of a comedy that just has never like lessened. And so I was like, well, I want to see what her documentaries look like. So I checked out the first one, and it's set in the LA punk scene in the early or late 70s. I think it's like 79 into like 1980 or something. And it's like wild. Like it's really, really raw. Like seriously, someone took like a 16 millimeter camera, went into these crazy punk clubs and just like was getting beat up by all the people in the mosh pit and whatever, but just capturing these personalities. Like literally, I would say fly on the wall, but it's more like fly in the middle of the chaos. Just experiencing a musical scene. And it's, you watch these people and you're like, oh man, these people, some of them are just not long for this world. And sadly they're not. And it's,
wow.
Some of them die really, really young. But it's just a really scrappy, well done portrait of a moment. And so I was like, that was great. And I kind of like louder raucous music. So the music didn't put me off, which I can imagine it might for some. But anyway, after 1 was so good, I was like, well, let's do 2. So 2, this is the one that probably got her Wayne's World. 2 is set in the mid 80s, in the middle of the like hair metal Sunset Strip scene. So like Poison and all these people. Mm-hmm. And this one plays like real life Spinal Tap. So
okay.
Where like the first one is like crazy people who don't even care about making money. They're just like, no, I have to tell it like it is. Like, the police treat us like crap and I have to say something about it. I have to write a song. This is like all these rock stars who are like, I just want money and babes, dude. And like Paul Stanley of Kiss, his interview is literally him on a bed with 3 Playboy models just laying next to him and petting him. Like that's every time he appears, that's what you're seeing. And you're like, wow. This is so ridiculous. It's like so like almost embarrassing. You know, you have like secondhand cringe for these guys. And it's funny because then I started reading a little bit afterwards, and people were saying in the scene, and people who even participated in the movie, the rock stars, they're like, yeah, you know, this hair metal scene kind of died right after this movie, and we're pretty sure the movie killed it because we all realized how stupid we
Wow.
looked.
Amazing.
But you're like, oh, I can see someone watching that and going like, oh, yeah, she can do Wayne's World. Like she kind of gets the metal scene. She gets comedy. You know, she does sort of do a few little edits and whatnot to wring some humor out of it. Extra humor, I should say.
Extra.
But then lastly, I want to say, I guess one that did not come out until much, much later that she made was in the mid 90s. So Decline of Western Civilization 3. This one is about like the underground punk scene in the mid 90s in Los Angeles. And it's really, really grimy and grungy. And but what's interesting about this one is, like, I'd say the first third of it is about the music, but then she starts talking with the people who go to all these shows, and it turns out, you know, a lot of them are these like unhoused teenagers living on the streets. And so the documentary pivots into being about like unhoused teenagers in Los Angeles, and she follows them into these little squat houses they stay at. And like she checks in on people that she's spoken with before and they're dead. And like, and then some of the people she's following, their squat house catches fire, and then they have nowhere to go, and like another person dies. And like, it was, I cried. Like it was heartbreaking. And so it's very good. I mean, it honestly made me think like, what can I do? Like it, you know, it's just, you see people on the street and you hand them $1 and then you kind of forget about it and whatever. But this made me feel like, man, I got to do something. And so like, it's so funny for a whole different reason. I found them all to be worth watching for different reasons. You know, one was an interesting glimpse at a period of time. The second one was almost like a funny parody of like metal music. And the third one made me feel like, how can we help people who need help? And yeah. So it was, I wasn't expecting it, but the series took me on an amazing ride. So I felt like it was worth.
Well, you know, you and I mean, in the vein of documentaries, we watched this Kid 90.
Yes. Oh yeah. I forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. Which, you know, this is Soleil Moonfry, who starred in Punky Brewster. She documented her childhood and teen years into her early adulthood, just, you know, with the video camera. And so she's got all this footage of her and kind of the child and teen stars of kind of that era of the late 80s into the mid 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, you know, sort of filtered through her perspective, and you know, it is ultimately, it's not any kind of a statement about a generation. It's just sort of her looking back at her life. But regardless, I think the footage, the people that we see, and just sort of what it says about that time and the corrosive effects of child and teen stardom, that was what really stuck out to me.
Yeah, same. I think, it was, whether she even realized it or not, I think it was sort of like her reliving everything she's been through, and almost even like realizing how corrosive it was, and like facing it for the first time and sort of working through it through the documentary. And it just, it was really tragic. I mean, certainly the things she was exposed to and went through, but also you just see all these friends of hers and all the tragedy that strikes them, you know, and it's, I don't know, whether it's drugs or depression or whatnot, and just not getting the help that they need.
Yeah, I mean, there's a very long list of people at the end who, you know, are featured in some form in the footage, but who are no longer with us, you know?
Right.
And for a variety of reasons, but certainly, you know, the one that I always think about is Jonathan Brandis, who was a child star for most of our lives. I mean, he was there, you know, in various things.
Mm-hmm.
The original It, and he starred in Sequest and whatnot. And by the early 2000s, the work had dried up, and you know, he was dealing with depression and whatever, and he ended up taking his own life, you know. And this is something, when you think about it, it's just like the glare of the spotlight is so overwhelming, And you have to adapt to that. You have to psychologically adapt to that. And then like that glare is turned off.
Yeah. And not to
And-
attribute this to Brandis specifically. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I'm just like, I can't imagine what that does to you. And, I mean, Jonathan Brandis is just one example of somebody who had a hard time grappling with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark Paul Gosselaar says something. And again, I don't know exactly what Brandis was going through, but Gosselaar says, like, yeah, it gets to the point where you go into a room with people, like casting people, and they're basically like, no, you look wrong. And it's like, you're a kid. Like how, like, so even if like, maybe you did have some success before that. Yeah. So you think the world is yours and you're young, like you don't have the perspective. Even adults probably couldn't have a healthy, grasp or handle on, but like so you're young. And then all of a sudden, like you said, like the light suddenly switches off and says like, no, everything about you is wrong. We don't need you anymore. I mean, what does that do to a kid?
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, what else? Anything else you've seen recently?
Why, yes, I did, Zachy. Actually, I went back to the 90s and watched a movie I have never seen before, which is Judge Dredd, the Sylvester Stallone action movie.
The Sylvester Stallone opus, Judge Dredd.
Opus. So, while you were here, this came up somehow. We saw the trailer, and I don't remember why.
I want to be very clear about this. So just so our listeners have I did not encourage this. This is Brian deciding to go off the reservation.
By the way, how delightful and various are the things we watched this past week? They're all over the map.
It runs the gamut. Yeah, it really
all over. This might be one of the widest spreads we've had. Okay, so yeah, we watched the trailer somehow, and this has come up a lot where we'll do a commentary on a 90s film that I've never seen, something like The Phantom or whatever. And it's just never been on my radar, but when I watch it, I go, man, I miss that 90s aesthetic. With like a bit more like special effects, sort of practical sort of things. And yeah, it doesn't always look as good, but it's just like, I don't know, there's something you can like wrap your head around a little bit in a certain way, like a feel, a tone. And so every now and then when there's a movie that I missed, I'm like, I want to dive back into that a little bit. So we saw the trailer for Judge Dredd, and I was seeing all this crazy matte paintings and, optical effects with these flying cars and whatever. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that. So, and I looked it up, it's 90 minutes. And so I did Chef's Kiss and queued it up. And you know what? I actually don't know what to say about it. Like, is it good? No. Like, is it terrible? No. Like, it's just exactly what you think it is. You know what I mean? Like, it's overwrought. I kind of appreciated Stallone really going for it. Like, he is unapologetically going for it, like even the drama and whatnot. And I was like, it doesn't quite fit in the movie. Like, it stands out a little bit, like his sincerity. But I was like, you know what? Yeah, man, go for it. And like Diane Lane is like fun and really beautiful. And Rob Schneider took me back to when I was like, oh yeah, Rob Schneider. I used to love that guy in SNL, like, and the thing I came for, like, we talked a long time ago about the Super Mario Brothers movie from the 90s. And I was like, do I like it? Not necessarily. However, it, for me personally, is like completely watchable because of the visuals. I mean, the set design, the fact that there are sparks flying everywhere in every scene for some reason. I don't know why, but I love it. Like wet city streets, neon lights. It's almost like a screensaver, like an active, alive, action-packed screensaver I could just stare at for 2 hours, And I would say this is pretty close to that in that respect, where I just really loved the production design. I mean, just even when he goes to the apartment building at the beginning, Rob Schneider, and there's that like robot that's going up and down the thing, and it's this practical robot. And I was like, I just like looking at it, and that I had that the whole way through. I just loved looking at this movie. Having said that, it is like pretty.
You did not like listening to this movie.
I mean, there's not a lot here. It's very, very simple. It's, like, I mean, I think comic book movies have come a long way in that they don't feel like they need to be absolute basic sort of villains and basic plots, and you know what I mean? Like they could be
Yeah.
a little more nuanced, a little richer, a little more intelligent. And so this feels very simple. And if not for the visuals, I don't know that I would have hung in there for it. But
Yeah.
so yeah. I enjoyed it for the flavor I was looking for like 90 minutes, but there was very little else there for me.
So this is a movie. So when I was younger, I read the Judge Dredd comic books, which are he's a British creation, but it's an American character, And I remember, and I know people listening be like, "Oh, Zach, here's another comic you read as a kid." Look, I read a lot of comics as a kid. Okay. um, but I remember visiting England in the 80s, and my cousin used to buy 2000 AD, which is the weekly magazine that had Judge Dredd, and it had Judge Dredd on the cover, and I was like, who is that? He just has a cool look, and I was like, oh, that's Judge Dredd. And that's how I read the comics, I would say from the mid to late 80s, on and off. I would get it in Saudi Arabia, and tonally they were heavily satirical. So think RoboCop. RoboCop is shamelessly riffing on the tone of Judge Dredd.
I read that. And so for a while they had a hard time adapting Judge Dredd because RoboCop kind of took that and owned it, and it was like, well, now we're just going to feel like RoboCop.
That's right. And so the film is sort of fascinating because it gets everything right except the main character.
Huh.
Because the production design really evokes the comics, and they spent money on this. It has a great Silvestri score.
Yes,
a great score. The cast is amazing. I mean, it's stacked with really impressive supporting players.
Yep.
Max von Sydow and Jürgen Prochnow and Armand Assante, and you mentioned Diane Lane, etc. Great supporting cast, everything. Unfortunately, the main character, they give Judge Dredd an arc, and I'm like, well, that's the problem, because Judge Dredd is a fascist asshole. That's his deal.
Oh, interesting.
That's the whole deal. In any other story, he's the bad guy. He's the jackbooted, authoritarian. Because that's the whole point, right? Where it's this dark future where essentially the police have been replaced by a force that is judge, jury, and executioner. Well, that's not good.
Right.
That's not the hero under normal circumstances, and that uncomfortable balance is what gave the comic book life, and it's you had stories like in the nuclear wasteland, you have it's like the Burger Wars, where you have the Burger King cult and the McDonald's cult are at war with each other and stuff like that, right? It's heavily satirical.
I would love to watch that. Wait, is that what the newer one is like?
Tone, not the Burger War stuff, but in terms of black comedy, absolutely.
Okay, so I will check that out now because I'm interested. You've told me that the newer one is better.
It's a very good movie, and that's the main thing is in the comics, the one ironclad rule is Judge Dredd. We never see him without his helmet on because he's faceless justice.
Right.
Faceless authoritarianism. And so, that was one. Carl Urban, who played the role in the newer film, that was his no, I'm not going to take off. That's Judge Dredd. He himself was like, of course I'm not going to take off the helmet,
Right.
But yes, like you, I watched the film at an age where I was a fan of Judge Dredd at a time when nobody was a fan of Judge Dredd in the 90s. So I'm rooting for this film to succeed, even though it has very, it does a lot of fundamental things wrong when it comes to the character. But yeah, it came out summer of 95, just got obliterated, obviously,
Yeah.
That being said, they did multiple crossovers with Batman and Judge Dredd. And I have a collection of those. I should lend that to you because I think you'd get a kick out of it.
Yeah. How does that work with the time periods?
Yeah, it's like, multiverse portal, something or other kind of deal,
Sure. Okay.
I think Batman ends up in Mega City 1, and I don't remember exactly how that happens, but him and Judge Dredd are at odds, obviously.
Right.
Even though they're both vaguely fascistic when you think about it. but yeah, that I feel like that was Stallone's like franchise play to get into like the superhero game a little bit, and
Sure,
it
sure.
blew up in his face. That didn't do so well. Now, that being said, the movie was directed by a British director named Danny Cannon, and it came out and it just tanked. And that poor guy, that would have been the end of his career, but for the fact that a mere 5 years later, he directed the pilot of a little show called CSI.
Unbelievable.
Talk about good luck.
Yes, good for it. You know what though? Dread again. It's hard to talk about it because, like I said, I love the feel of it, and that's about it. So I was like, this guy's got talent. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a bummer that he had to go down with the ship in a way, because it sounds like there was a lot of creative arguments behind the scenes too, and wrestling.
Him and Stallone did not get along. Yeah,
yeah. I think a lot of what he pulled off showed that he had chops to make big, exciting movies like that. So it's. But good for him.
Young too. He must and for those listening, what's important to recognize is that when you direct the pilot of a show, you are credited as an executive producer for the entirety of the show.
Yes. Yeah.
And the reason being that your stylistic template is what is then adapted for the rest of the series. So it's a very important job, getting that gig. And CSI. At least insofar as the original, I mean, that lasted 15 years, and I'm assuming that he retained some kind of credit on at least the new Vegas series. I don't know if he's credited on the other ones, but he's doing all right. That's my point.
Yeah, yeah. Woo. That's why, a lot of times when you see a TV show and then the pilot's directed by some big Hollywood filmmaker, it's a good gig. Good gig if you can get it.
That's right. So let's take a short break. We got a couple listener letters to read through. And we're back, and we got some listener letters here. Here's a note, Brian, that we got from Josh Hopman.
All right.
He emailed us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com, and he says, just listen to your newest podcast where you addressed Argyle and the criticism surrounding it. Having been to see it twice in theaters now, I have to say I disagree with the critics and actually really, really enjoyed it. It's a blast. Nothing particularly revelatory, just a lot of fun. You both mentioned being curious as to why it had such a low turnout in theaters, and I'm pretty certain that it's due to poor marketing, both in the editing of the trailers. Case in point, Zachy saying he thought it was a cat movie. It's not about the cat, nor, to the dismay of everyone, is it primarily about Henry Cavill's character. I strongly encourage you guys to check it out, if anything, just to see Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell give some pretty fun performances. Oh, and Brian mentioning The Holdovers made me quite happy. It, too, was one of my favorites of 2023. The following is said with my most serious Paul Giamatti expression. Zachy, I hope you get to see it soon. I am planning to watch it. I saw my wife was watching it, and I was like, "Hey, I wanted to watch that." So she stopped, and she's waiting for me, and now I'm toying with her by just not watching it. So let's see how this goes.
Diabolical.
This may end up with us having watched the movie or no longer married. I don't know. It could go either way. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
I've got to say, and yes, the Holdovers is one of the few movies in recent memory where I'm like, oh, this will enter the rotation. Like, this will be one that I revisit. So I can't wait for you to see it, Zachy. And then regarding Argyle, I wondered. We did not see it, but part of me did.
But Brian, we weren't like shitting all over it at all. I think we were
because we hadn't seen it.
Yeah, so exactly. We weren't like, oh, this looks stupid. We were just like, the budget is ridiculous, which regardless of how good it is, which I will take Josh's word, the budget is absolute insanity.
Absolutely. And I think, like we were saying, like some life circumstances came in the way and we didn't fight them. You know what I mean? Like, but I will say there was a little percentage of me that wondered, because every now and then there's a movie that everyone piles on, but if you go into it with the right mindset, you're like, well, that wasn't so bad. And I had wondered if this might be one of those movies. And on another podcast I listened to, someone had written in, actually, because the people on that show trashed it. We haven't seen it, so we didn't do that. But those people had trashed it. And then someone wrote in and gave their perspective on the film, like what they thought it actually meant. And hearing that letter also, I was like, Huh. Well, all right. Like I'm like kind of curious to try to go at it that way. And then now with Josh saying this, like I will absolutely watch this movie. I don't know when. Maybe when it's streaming, but I will watch it and comment on it for sure.
There you go, Josh. You will watch it, no matter how long it takes.
Okay, Day Lewis.
I'm gonna watch it though. She liked it. She said it was pretty decent.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I forgot.
Yeah.
She saw that.
Yeah. So
okay. So wait, but you did you say you were gonna check it out? I don't.
I will check it out, and I'll find out whether I agree with her. So this may end with me liking Argyle, or it may end with us no longer being married. I don't know. We're gonna see. See what happens.
Yeah. Case number 2 of that. Wow.
This is a kind of a minefield that we're navigating now, Brian. I don't know.
Episode 285. It could go down in history.
Thank you for that, Josh. Oh, and we're talking about big budgets. Did you see this insanity? The Joker sequel,
Mm-hmm.
Folie à Deux, or whatever the hell it's called,
Mm-hmm.
is going to end up costing around $200 million. They're spending Argyle money on this bitch, Brian.
200 million. The first one cost 60 million.
60 million.
And went on to make $1 billion, which is still something I can't wrap my head around. And that's not a comment on the movie. I'm still, because that movie isn't like your typical superhero movie. It's very dark and grimy and dramatic, right? So, hats off. I get it. But I can't. And this one is a musical. I don't know if that's something like the other musicals are going to try to hide from everybody. But it's $200 million on a Joker musical.
Right?
I don't know, man.
Isn't that crazy?
I don't know. And hey, you know what? Maybe this one will make $2 billion, and we'll be, Warner Brothers will go, we told you. But it also, I think part of that conversation was that the box office is not performing in the way that it used to. It's a lot more unpredictable than it used to be. So who knows how this movie performs? I really can't even predict.
I mean, I'm somebody who I'm like a nervous gambler. I think that's the takeaway, because I'm just like, you guys, you ran the tables and you beat the house. You know what I mean?
Right.
Take your winnings and leave the casino. And the idea that they're in fact not just doubling down, but tripling down.
Yeah.
On a Joker sequel, which the last one came out 5 years ago, and I'm going to say, we're in a different world than we were 5 years ago.
Totally.
Right? I don't know that there's the same audience. Now, again, if this one ends up doing well, then I'll just look like an asshole, and that's fine. I'll admit it. But I'm skeptical that there is enough of an audience to make $200 million on a Joker sequel make sense.
Yeah. I do have to say though, I am intrigued by this movie, and like the Lady Gaga of it all, like, because she seems very calculated in what she does. Like, she can kind of do whatever she wants. So it seems like she's very choosy in particular, like A Star Is Born, House of Gucci, regardless of how that was received or performed. I mean, making a Ridley Scott movie, and it's like a perfect role for her. So her choosing to do this makes me raise an eyebrow and go, well, what is here that made her feel like, I'll put myself out here like this because this is worth it for me. Yeah. So I have a high curiosity factor about this movie, but we'll see how it resonates with the world, I guess.
I guess we'll find out later. What is that? In October it comes out? I'm assuming same time. Same as the first one, probably.
Yeah.
Exactly. There you go.
I thought you were going to say
that. I should have. I'm just I'm slow on the uptake today. Sorry, Brian.
Nah.
I am actually curious. When does it come out? It is October 4th of this year. So we'll be talking about it. We know that.
Oh yeah.
Here's another message we got at our email address, and this is from Mark McGee, who he says, "Hey guys, I've loved hearing everyone's favorite movie experiences in the last few episodes and thought I'd share one of mine. There have been a lot of great ones. Seeing The Towering Inferno at age 10 and thinking it was the loudest, biggest movie I'd ever seen. The midnight premiere showing of Batman 89, where the packed house cheered at the opening credits. Watching Beetlejuice at a sneak preview, where no one could understand what kind of movie we were watching until the day-o dinner scene, which caused the theater to erupt in thunderous applause. But my favorite experience by far was being at the first showing of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in 1984. A couple of friends and I got to the movie theater at 8:30 a.m. to wait for the 11:30 showing, and we were the first in line. We actually bought our tickets through Ticketmaster a few weeks before.
Wow.
That's crazy. But it was still general admission regarding seating. I wore my semi-official Raiders fedora that I bought at Chess King in 81, and the three of us played Trivial Pursuit to occupy the time. The line quickly grew, and everyone was gleeful with anticipation. When they let us in, we all ran to the theater, hooting and hollering, and got perfect seventh-row center seats. I remember how cheerful the crowd was. We all were there for the same reason, and even though we didn't know everyone there, we felt we did. As soon as the credits rolled, the cheers began, and to this day, when I watch the film, I remember those initial crowd reactions. The laughing at the unexpected musical opening, the wild applause when we first see Indy in his white tux, the exhausted exuberance after the roller coaster ride like first 15 minutes, the happy screams during the bug scene, the shock of the heart removal scene, and the white-knuckled mine car chase and bridge fight at the finale. As the end credits began, everyone got up and gave the movie a standing ovation. I remember being totally exhausted with the biggest smile on my face. Because this was the first showing, there were local news crews waiting for our reactions outside, but because I drank a huge Diet Coke and didn't dare to leave the movie for 1 minute, I darted to the restroom immediately after. I was told by my friends that they were interviewed by a reporter and that they tried to have them wait for me because I was wearing a fedora, but they quickly moved on to other patrons. It was such a wonderful communal experience that is sadly disappearing in this day and age. I went back the following day and probably the day after that, and the crowds were equally enthusiastic. But there was nothing like the first day. Thanks for letting me share this story, and I look forward to hearing more from other listeners. And thanks again for another enjoyable episode.
Mark, that was so lovely. I really love that.
I feel like I was there.
Me too. I just got like just the warm fuzzies reading that. And like a movie that's just kind of been there my whole life, you know, and I'm just sort of used to seeing on TV or whatever, but to like try to transport myself into that moment. I was too young, unfortunately, for that. But like to try to imagine seeing these things for the first time with a crowd, and after Raiders, and we don't have all the other films. It's like, what is another Indiana Jones movie like? And it's so different and shocking and action packed. And I mean, that was a really, really wonderful story. Thank you for that.
I love it. Let's take another short break. We'll come back with some headlines. All right, we're back, and the Super Bowl's a couple weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did, yeah. Did you?
I did not. I decided to, even though San Francisco was playing, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna not watch this. That was my choice.
Yeah, we always get like a little group together and watch it, but I mean, it's, our interests are all over the map. It's more of like a reason to get together and half pay attention to the game, half pay attention to the commercials.
Well, this was in fact the highest rated Super Bowl ever.
I saw that. Yeah,
and it is therefore the highest rated TV broadcast ever, notwithstanding like the moon landing, I suppose.
Absolutely crazy. Yeah. Wow. I mean, actually, I just said wow when I was ready to kind of move on, but like, no, wow. that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, in the streaming age, we are far removed from when an episode of a show can command that kind of an audience. We talked about this, many episodes ago, where like, what were the finale ratings for various shows? You remember this? We're kind of going through, and nothing is ever going to touch MASH, right?
Right.
But we're past the point where any show will ever get that. So all you really have is the Super Bowl. This year was a weird one because you had like the weird anti-Taylor Swift freak out, and it was just bizarre watching that whole online spectacle play out.
Right.
Travis Kelce wants everyone to get vaccinated. He's the devil, or people saying crazy stuff. And for whatever reason, all those people complaining, they still watched, is my point.
And I mean, a lot of people who love those people, like it just cannot be understated the impact and what Taylor Swift can bring to a room. So
all I can say is slay, Queen. I don't know what that means. I don't know who I am anymore, Brian. Honestly, I've become something I don't recognize.
That's hilarious.
But regardless, the real reason you watch the Super Bowl, that's the game, the footy of it all, notwithstanding, you watch for the commercials advertising the movies that are going to come out in the summer. That's what the Super Bowl is about.
Ever since high school, that's where you got to see the Independence Day trailer and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you always anticipate you'll see some of the biggest trailers of the year. But this, have you noticed there's like this trend now where basically they'll show you 15 seconds and be like, okay, it's online, go there now. Because it costs like $7 million to advertise, for 30 seconds during the Super Bowl. So it's like, well, let's just pay for half of that, tell people where they can go watch the 2.5 minute version of it and, wipe our hands. We're good.
Yeah. Which kind of, I miss that. I definitely, because, and I've been teaching long enough now where it was a common thing the day after the Super Bowl, I'd go and be like, well, what were some of the good commercials? And we'd go back and forth for, 15, 20 minutes. Now, nobody watched the commercials.
What's funny? I was noticing something. I felt this for the past couple of years, but it finally hit me what's wrong with all the Super Bowl commercials now. I mean, first and foremost, that used to be the stuff that would go viral, right? Before the internet and TikTok and all that stuff. Like they would have some sort of hook, like the Budweiser frogs, and then everyone would say that catchphrase for a year, right?
That's right.
And now there's just so much to compete with. They started getting weirder, like you'd have the Old Spice guy that was like super surreal and it was so wacky and weird that it was funny and it would get your attention. You'd be like, did you see that weird thing? And then they have to push it even further. And now I feel like there are two crazy problems with the Super Bowl ads. One, they're way overstuffed with celebrities. It's not just enough to have one celebrity. It's like they have to have like 4 in one commercial, where it's like Messi is like playing soccer on the beach, but then he happens to pass Jason Sudeikis for some reason, who's just like, oh, I know that guy. And you're like, why is he in that? And so then it starts to feel like a fever dream and you don't even remember which celebrity was in which commercial. And then the second thing is most of these commercials now I think are designed to be online. So they're like 2 to 3 minutes long. The actual commercial itself is like a 2-minute, 3-minute mini movie that is then hacked to 30 seconds to air on television. So it becomes nonsense. You know what I mean? So it's like you're just celebrities are shoved in your face. It's like watching a movie on fast forward and then you don't even know what you saw by the end of the day. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know. I think maybe if it's drawing everybody to their websites, then it's working and they're watching all the stuff online. But otherwise, I feel like maybe they need to go back to basics a little bit, slow their roll.
Well, in that vein, I mean, let's talk about some of the movies that we got sneak previews of. There was a teaser. It's like, is this even a teaser? This is a TV spot for Deadpool and Wolverine, aka Deadpool 3, and this one is now the most viewed trailer in YouTube history.
It's crazy. It's crazy when those sorts of numbers continue to get topped.
365 million views. So that leaves in the dirt the record number of people who watched the Super Bowl.
Yeah, right.
Now this one, by way of context, Deadpool and Wolverine is it as far as the MCU this year.
So they have to be feeling pretty good about this.
I was about to say, I was like, any concerns about Marvel is dead may be overstated, although obviously a lot of that will depend on how the film is actually received. But I'm kind of curious what you thought of this trailer. Let's not bother playing the audio. We get, Deadpool has a birthday. He's whisked away by the TVA. Hilarity ensues.
I now that you say it, I'm thinking I might have just seen the version that was on TV. So I don't know that I've seen the whole trailer. And
I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing, Brian. I think.
Okay, so I mean, my general feeling was, I'm looking forward to this movie because I love the idea of pitting those two people together, which is something we never thought we would see, and it's like the buddy comedy, sort of seeing it with those two characters. I think is going to be really, really fun and unexpected and whatever. I have to say, the trailer, I just felt like it's just kind of what I was used to with Deadpool, sort of Kraken wise, and like saying kind of funny stuff. It's like really more his tone is funnier than the things he's actually saying, but it's like you cackle because the cadence is right. And then seeing the shadow of Wolverine over him, I was like, well, that's the movie, right? That's probably what the second act is going to be. And then you kick off for the rest of the film. And that's what I want to see. So I'm already like on board for this. So I'd say the trailer, I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah, like I'm ready. I'm ready. Like let's do this. I just want to go see them bouncing off of each other.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you where it's like, well, I mean, you know what you're getting, right? I mean, it's Deadpool. He's a known quantity at this point, and I think it's smart to not show Wolverine at all.
I think so too. Why spoil any of it?
Yeah, you know what I mean. And we know that there's going to be another trailer that probably gives us more of that. But this is just enough to get. I think it's been long enough now, right? Because the last Deadpool movie was what? When does that? 2018, I think. It's been 6 years already since the last Deadpool movie.
Wow.
Holy crap. Regardless, he's been away long enough that I think there is a certain amount of like fondness now,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Right. And I think that helps. And like we said, I think Marvel is probably happy that this is the one thing, that this is the one at bat they have this year, at least in the theater. Although I would assume they're not thrilled about Sony sort of, scotch taping the Marvel logo to 3 of their movies this year.
But I mean, this is the kind of event thing that I think they need right now. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like this feels epic. Like you got to see this. Right. So I think they're very lucky that this year that's the one thing they get to release.
I do. I mean, they've been leaning hard into this multiverse saga business, and that I think that's a conversation you and I have had where it's like, is this really, are people interested in multiverses? It seems like it seems to be leaning towards a no.
Right. Or enough is enough.
Yeah, maybe that's a better. Yeah. So that's sort of interesting because, like, obviously the Jonathan Majors stuff going on, he, in addition to his conviction, he's been fired from Marvel. So there's a whole thing of like, is remember Avengers, whatever the hell, what number 5 was going to be Avengers, the Kang Dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's been scrapped.
Right.
So presumably they're just cutting the Kang character completely.
Right.
Which is probably fine, honestly, because Quantumania was not particularly well received. And you and I talked about how the way where Loki, the second season, leaves Kang, it's almost like we could just never see that character again and it'd be perfectly fine.
Yeah. And I like the idea that there's nothing wrong with realizing that an avenue isn't working quite right. So you pivot, Well, I mean, it's a lot more than not working out quite right, but I mean, in terms of, but you know what I'm saying? Like I would like the idea of a studio, no matter how big they are, realizing what isn't working and just striving to make the best thing possible instead of being like, no, this was our plan,
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of Marvel, I mean, we got to mention, they finally announced the cast of the new Fantastic Four.
Oh yeah, that's right. Which it was on Valentine's Day, right?
Yeah, that's right. So this one is due to come out next summer, so 2025, and we've got Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. We got Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm. We got Joseph Quinn from Stranger Things. He's going to be Johnny Storm, and Eben Moss Backrack is going to be Ben Grimm, the Thing.
Cousin.
I will say, I really like this cast. I think What I have not seen The Bear, so I had to do some just looking up clips of Eben or Eben, um, and he's really good just from what I've
Dude,
seen.
he is the best character on that show. I love
Really?
that guy. When I heard that he was going to be in this film, like I am so beyond delighted. Yeah, love him. You
Wow.
love The Bear, by the way. I think you'll enjoy it.
I know it's it really. I know that. I know I will. So I'm just trying to squeeze in some time. But it's funny because Pedro Pascal. I said this online. To me he looks like a Jack Kirby drawing. So I find this cast. I really like it. I don't know. Vanessa Kirby, obviously. I mean, God, it's like perfect. And I'm like, just whatever Vanessa Kirby wants to be in. I'm like, let her be in it because she's fantastic. That was not a pun.
But hey, if it works, it works.
Take it. But Fantastic Four is one of 4 Marvel movies scheduled for next year.
So what are they?
We got Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, Captain America 4, which is the Brave New World,
and I keep forgetting about that.
And yeah, a lot of people forgetting about it. And Blade.
Oh, that's still projected for next year?
I don't know, man. I if I were to guess, I would say that one gets kicked to 2026.
Might be for the best, honestly. Like keep it. Yeah, 3 sounds good to me. Well,
no, I mean it looks like they've got 4 scheduled for 26. Okay, Marvel, you guys got to keep it at 3. Let's space this stuff out a little bit.
And color me cautious about Thunderbolts.
I'm kind of with you on that one. I don't know. I think, here's what I'm going to say. Honestly, I think notwithstanding, like, I think Daredevil, the series is going forward and they have a couple of series projects, but I think it's smart that there's nothing else really in the barrel as far as streaming series, which is a good idea, I would say.
Sure.
Because you got to increase the scarcity,
Yeah.
I think let build up to it. So my point is, as far as Thunderbolts, here's the thing: the premise of the comic book was terrific, which was it's all of these villains who pretend that they're heroes, and that's kind of the twist is that they're the Thunderbolts in the comic. It was actually it was a pretty great twist because they promoted the comic for months. It's like, oh, here's this new superhero team, and not even the readers knew the twist until they got to the end of the first issue. So it was a terrific twist, and that's something like Baron Zemo and all these various characters, only some of whom have been seen in the films. This movie seems to be doing kind of a Suicide Squad type thing.
Yeah, sure.
But with inherently less, not less appealing characters, I would say. Characters
that may have landed as strongly as they might have anticipated,
yeah,
I think.
Right. Like other than Winter Soldier.
Right.
I mean, who else is in it, right? Like you got Florence Pugh.
I'm trying to remember from Hawkeye.
Is Hawkeye in it?
No. Haley, what's her name? Stanfield, right?
Is she in it? I don't think she's in it.
Oh, I thought so. Maybe I'm wrong. Steinfeld.
I know.
I'm not very good at this.
I thought they're setting her up to be in Haley Steinfeld.
Yeah. Oh, she's not in that? Which I actually did like Hawkeye, by the way. I feel like I'm on an island with that. The TV show.
I'm with you, brother. I thought it was a good show too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like Red Guardian and Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp. Like it's kind of random characters.
Yeah, this kind of feels like a Disney Plus series to me.
This one should be a series, you're saying?
Yeah, maybe. But we'll see. We'll see.
I'm cautiously optimistic. But Fantastic Four is directed by Matt Shakman, by the way. He did WandaVision. He also directed Monarch: Legacy of Monsters, which I've been telling you to check that one out.
Oh yeah, that's right. You have.
Which you should. I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
So I hope it's good. I love the Fantastic Four, and I've yet to see. I mean, there have been, not including that like unreleased one from the early '90s. There have been three times they've tried to make this thing work, and it hasn't. And I think if you tackle it right, it's a great concept.
See, as the person who's not as versed in comic books as you, I hear that so often. Everybody is always like, "Oh, if you just nail Fantastic Four," and I don't know that. Like, I don't have that sense. So hearing people like you say that makes me excited at the possibility of this getting executed well and having like a new superhero movie I can be very excited about.
Yeah, I mean, it's the movies from the 2000s with the Johan Griffith and Michael Chiklis and so, like, I think that the character dynamics were pretty good in those films.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Evans was like fantastic in those. Again, no pun intended. He's really
Yeah,
he's good in those movies. That's my point.
I do remember that. I remember he was a standout in those.
He was good. I thought the back and forth with Michael Chiklis, all that stuff worked, but it's just it had this like WPWR syndicated, right? Like, like
that is so specific, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. He's talking about a local syndicated television station in Chicago and the types of movies they would show on like a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's like they had like Mutant X or Nightman and stuff like that, and where it's like,
right.
And that was because Fox at that time was like, oh, let's just nickel and dime this stuff, right?
Right.
And I think you got to spend some money. You don't need to spend Argyle money. Although they probably will spend Argyle money.
Yeah.
Actually.
Dude, you just need a good story. You need good characters. Like, give me something that I really care about. And there you go. I don't care how big it looks. I don't care about the special effects at all. I just want to care about these people and what they're going through. That's it.
Yeah, I read a recent thing about how David Krumholtz, he of Oppenheimer, but of course he's been around since forever, from Numbers and everything else. He basically just begged Matt Shackman to give him a role. He wanted to play Ben Grimm, and he didn't get the job, but he's quite he's pretty. If you follow David Krumholtz on Twitter, he's very funny because he's got like 30 years of Hollywood stories.
Yeah, he should write a book. I'd read that.
He really should. And I mean, it's really extraordinary because first time I ever saw him, he was on this sitcom called Chicago Suns.
Uh-huh.
And it was like one of those NBC, how NBC had their must-see TV Thursday, and there was always that one slot that was like the store in the mall that keeps closing.
Yes.
It's like, oh, the single guy and, Caroline in the City or whatever. So this was like Chicago Suns. It had its minute there. And it was like D.W. Moffat, Jason Bateman, and David Krumholtz play three brothers who live in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly revolutionary premise. But anyway, the first time I ever saw him was in that, and then he was in like the Justice League TV pilot. Do you remember this?
No.
There was a Justice League TV pilot, fall of '97.
Okay.
Which was I think it was made for CBS. You can find it on YouTube. It's one of the worst things you'll ever see.
Actually, I'm writing this down. I'm very curious.
It's amazingly bad, and the fact that it's got Miguel Ferrer is in it. He's the villain.
Mm-hmm.
David Ogden Stiers from MASH. He plays the Martian Manhunter.
I can't even imagine this in my mind.
A very pudgy Martian Manhunter.
Wait, so Batman and Superman are in it? Wonder Woman?
They are not in it. Batman and Superman. What are you thinking, Brian?
Well, I'm starting to erase it from my thing here.
you're adorable. No, it has like it's like the Flash and who are the heroes in this? The Flash, the Atom, Green Lantern. But they all live together. It's like this weird, like Modern Family talking to the camera thing. It's freaking weird.
Are you serious?
I'm not making this up. You got to watch it. I can't. I can't explain it. It's
okay.
It's just very weird. Michelle Hurd. Michelle Hurd is in it also.
You know what's so funny? I went on a whole roller coaster ride. First, I was like, I can't picture a CBS show with Batman and Superman in it. Then you tell me they're not in it, and I don't care anymore. And now you say it's like The Office, Justice League. I'm like, well, all right, I kind of have to see this.
It is. I mean, it's a train wreck, but of a kind that you're unlikely to ever see again.
Okay.
But anyway, David Krumholtz was in that, and then of course he went on to be in Numbers, et cetera, et cetera. And now he's the scientist guy and Oppenheimer. So that's pretty nice. That's all I'm saying.
He must have. I mean, like I was saying, like a book full of anecdotes, and it would all be related to entertainment we've watched for most of our lives. So I think that's something he should put together.
Again, that show Chicago Suns, which I just happened to find recently on YouTube. Somebody managed to upload the whole series onto YouTube.
YouTube, do you ever think about that? Maybe this is a very, very, very old thought, but it's like anything I want to show someone, I expect I can go on YouTube and pull it up.
Yeah.
And you think someone had to have the source and take the time to create their own page, to upload that random 5 seconds from that movie from 1987 I wanted to show somebody. It's incredible.
It is. Well, it's kind of when something isn't on YouTube,
yeah,
we're more bothered by it, right? Like,
I know,
because of just the ability to find anything. Like, I'll give you an example, and actually you may have some familiarity with this. There was this commercial that I had spent literally years, Brian, trying to find on YouTube.
Yeah.
Okay. And it was a commercial. It was like a Burger King commercial from late 91, early 92. And the jingle was stuck in my head. And every once in a blue moon, I would just get on YouTube and do a search for it. I wouldn't find it. And it's just, and then a year ago, I was visiting you and I just did my search and I found it. Brian. It was there. You couldn't see because I had to excuse myself because tears started flowing from my eyes, unprompted. That's how happy I was. And I create a little playlist on YouTube, and I saved that video to my playlist. And every once in a while, I just put on that commercial, and I'd be happy.
Yep.
And then one day I was like, I feel like hearing that jingle again, and it was gone. It was gone, Brian. It was gone. The video is gone. The channel's gone. Everything's gone, like it never existed, like a mirage in the desert. And I have been forlorn for the better part of the last year because you know why? Because I held it in my hands. I tasted it.
YouTube giveth, YouTube taketh
and
away.
And it was taken away from, it was taken away. I tasted it and it was gone. I don't know what to do.
Oh, so you didn't rip it.
I didn't rip it. Because I'm a fool, Brian, a goddamn fool.
I don't know if I would have thought to do that either, because I would just take for granted, assume like, oh, it's there now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's now a part of my universe for the rest of my life.
Yep. So anyway, David Krumholtz, kudos.
David Krumholtz, yeah.
Kudos to Krumholtz. Speaking of being part of our universe for the rest of our lives, Jurassic Park, as we mentioned last time, the franchise is kicking along.
If anybody was worried it was going away, it's never going away.
It is not going extinct, one might say.
Extinct. Well, actually, I'm sure dinosaurs never thought they were going to be extinct either, so we'll see what happens.
That's a good point. Touche. Here I am with the arrogance of a John Hammond when really you just don't know. So we mentioned last time that a new movie is on the way. This would be the 7th overall film, although it's beginning a brand new saga, which will involve, I'm guessing, dinosaurs.
One would presume.
Yeah. So David Leitch was originally attached. That was the scuttlebutt, if you will, that he was going to take over. He of the John Wick films. That did not end up happening. What's that?
I just said, which was interesting. I mean, he brings such a stunt-oriented aesthetic to what he does. So when that name was even considered, I was like, what does that look like for a dress?
That's exactly it. I was kind of like, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it would work, but I'm interested because it's something different. Yeah. That did not end up working out. However, since the movie has a release date coming out again summer of 25. So summer of 25 is getting stacked.
Yeah. Wow.
Which means they need to start filming, I think, like a week from
Yesterday?
tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they have signed Gareth Edwards to direct Jurassic World 7 or Jurassic 7, let's just say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this, I gotta be honest, Brian, this, as soon as I heard this, I was like, sign me up, find a vein, plug it in, feed it directly to me.
Oh, 100%. I think you and I had the same reaction. You texted me this and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, like this went from a curiosity to me, this movie, to like something I am now like jumping at the bit for. And the reason for that is this. Like, I think Gareth Edwards has had sort of a little bit of a mixed track record with, we weren't wild about The Creator, but we absolutely adored its aesthetic. He is a visionary. I think his only weakness is occasionally his screenplays.
Right.
And so here we have David Koepp, who made our favorite Jurassic Park movie, writing it. And we have Gareth Edwards, who is a visionary director who brings something I only see these days from him alone. You know, I mean, sign me up. Sign me. I could not be more excited about that.
That's yeah. You had my curiosity. Now you have my attention.
Yep.
That's basically this. So, but again, he's got his work cut out for him. That it's going to be an undertaking. However, I think, I would imagine that part of what appealed to Universal is that he suffered through all kinds of ungodly shit while making Rogue One.
Sure.
And he kept his yapper shut.
Even as recently as his press tour for The Creator, I was listening to him on NPR and they were asking him about it. And he was still very diplomatic and, grateful and humble. And yeah.
Yeah, I've heard him referred to often as the master of scale.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
And I think that's very apt. And certainly in a franchise like this, I mean, when you really think about it, we haven't truly gotten a sense of scale since Jurassic Park, the first.
Yeah, he has a very unique lived-in quality to the fantastical things he presents. Right? So I just cannot wait to see that applied to this franchise.
I'm intrigued. Although, like I said, I mean, next summer we got we got the Fantastic Four, we got Jurassic. We also have Superman Legacy.
Summer after this one.
Summer 25. I meant next summer. Yeah, sorry. Jeez, this summer does feel kind of like a whatever, doesn't it? Like,
well, yeah. What do we have actually?
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying.
We have Twisters, Twisters. I'm just looking at stuff. I'm not. The Fall Guy.
Okay. You can have an opinion on Twisters. It's fine.
I hope it's great. I loved the first one when it came out. Our friend Sean is like a Twister maniac. This is one of the things I love about him. When he was the EP over at Puppy Dog Pals, he was like, I am making a Twister episode. And I don't know if this is talking too out of school or whatever, but Disney was a little concerned. It's like, well, tornadoes are scary, aren't they? And he's like, by gum, I will make a Twister episode. And so they found their compromise. And he has like homages to Bill Paxton. He has homages to the Twister movie, like all in this Puppy Dog Pals episode. And it was truly a labor of love for him. So I love that. And I totally get the fun 90s-ness, appeal of the first Twister. I can't say that the trailer made me feel like, oh, I've got to see that.
Right.
But I would really love to feel like I'm watching something that feels like an old school white knuckle, man versus nature thriller. Like I love the idea of that. I can't say I quite got that from the trailer, but here's hoping, right?
I concur pretty much on your expectations for the new one and your feelings about the original. So,
well, perfect. What else is coming out this summer? I'm looking at Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but I don't know when that is.
That's I think that's like Memorial Day.
Okay, so like kicking off summer there.
Which that trailer for the new trailer, I mean, was pretty freaking great.
Oh, 100%. I saw the first one and I was like, okay, yeah, no, these are pretty dependable movies. I will, of course, I'll go see it. This second trailer was like, oh, okay, now I'm looking forward to this.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, Mad Max, Furiosa.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the summer. Yeah,
I'll say this from the trailer. It's looking a little bit more synthetic than the previous one than I would like. However, based on the strength of the previous one, I am still very much anticipating it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Brian. Go woke, go broke, right? Like that's the problem, right? I'm really invested in Furiosa doing well because I need those freaking assholes to be proven wrong.
Wait, are there really? I am being honest. Are there people really complaining about Furiosa?
Yeah, because it's like, oh, another male franchise that's being turned into a woman franchise.
Dude, I don't know. I really have nothing to say.
You know what I say? I'm always like, is it exhausting being like this all the time?
I'm actually trying to decide if I even want to think about this.
Right?
Like, if you made a movie,
are you annoying? Are you annoying to everybody you know when you're like that? Does anybody enjoy spending time with you? You know, those are the questions I ask.
I'm trying to, like, if Mad Max got killed in Furiosa, is like, well, you know what? I'm 10 times better anyway. Let's rock. Like, yeah, that'd be a little annoying because I like, of course, the Mad Max character, but that's not what this is. Like, this is another character in that universe who kicked a lot of ass. Like, immediately became an iconic character, and I want to see an action adventure with this character. So I don't know. I part of me wants to just like dismiss these people, and another part of me wants them to like have their eyes opened a little bit, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm hoping it's good though, and if nothing else, because George Miller. Speaking of visionaries, I think George Miller is a true visionary, and it's been 9 years since we've seen a movie from him, so it's about damn time.
I'm going to bring this up because I know absolutely nothing about this, and hopefully someone will write in. But I guess the trailer for Borderlands just dropped, which is based on a video game, comes out this summer, August, and I have no point of reference for this, so it looks really wacky. Kind of post-apocalyptic with these really kooky looking characters. I'm getting sort of like a deserty Guardians of the Galaxy vibe. I know nothing about it. I'm very curious.
Interesting cast, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and there's a Quiet Place sequel that's coming out June 28th.
Which is like A Quiet Place. Isn't it like the first day or something like that?
Yeah, I think it takes place in a whole other setting with different characters. Yeah, experiencing the beginning of the event that led to the first two movies.
Well, there we go. Yeah. That's what's coming this summer. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that.
Yeah, there you go.
But next 2025 sounds stacked also.
Pretty epic. Yeah.
I believe Jurassic is within weeks of Superman, the new Superman. And this is my honest question. Like, what do you think would end up doing better?
If I had to pick one, I would probably put my money on Jurassic.
Why is that?
Broader appeal.
Okay, yeah.
I think like little kids, older kids, adults, people who are endeared to their original, husband, wives, grandparents. Like, I just think Jurassic... Again, if I was strictly just put it to like numbers and try to gamble on this, I think I would put it on Jurassic, even though I am like super excited about it. Superman.
I wonder, because for all the complaints people have about the last three Jurassic movies, qualitatively, they're all kind of in the same neighborhood. And I think people know what to expect.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas I think with the problem Superman has, I'm guessing, is that you have to explain to people that this has nothing to do with the last decade worth of Superman.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think most people are gonna going to be able to understand that.
Yeah, and I don't think I hate to. This is so used so often, but I do think superhero fatigue is real, and I think some people are burnt out, sure, but more people might be on the fence about a superhero movie these days than they maybe several years ago would just show up. Like they need to know it's good. And they need to hear it's good from someone they trust or something. And so I do feel like that movie's going to have to drum up people a little bit more than it might have had to several years ago.
Yeah.
But I'm rooting for it. I'm excited.
Of course, I'm hoping it's good. As we record this, James Gunn just released the first picture of the whole cast together, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of people, and Superman is in there too, I guess.
Yeah.
But speaking of superhero fatigue, let's take a short break, and then we'll come back right after this. And we're back, and you know what else is back, Brian?
Who?
Well, it's Sony's cinematic universe of Marvel characters, aka Scum. That's our officially designated movie film acronym for Sony's Marvel movies. After last week, it's an acronym that is well deserved, Brian.
Bravo. Bravo. That was good. I was not prepared for that.
So Madam Web is in theaters right now, and not a lot of people know, based on the fact that when you and I went, there were probably 8 people in the theater, including us.
Yeah, and one was an infant in a stroller.
There you go. So, this now. There's so much to say, which we'll get into, but just from a sheer dollars and cents point of view, this movie, they said that the budget was 80 million. It's closer to 100 million. They spent 100 million on this, sure. And it opened to around 25 million domestically, around 50 million internationally. So this thing is I mean, it is a flop. There's no sugarcoating it.
Yeah.
And to be very clear, genuinely, I am genuine. I mean, yes, we were sort of kicking the can down the curb as far as going to see it, but I'll speak for myself, and I think you would agree. I still went in being like, I would love to be surprised by this,
dude. 100%. Actually, when the movie started, I had that feeling like I would love to be surprised by this and have like the alternate take. Like I would love for everyone hating on this and me being like, you know what, it's fun. What's wrong with you people?
Yes,
but. That was not the case.
It was not. I've been reviewing movies for close to 30 years at this point. 30 years almost. And this may be one of the most ineptly constructed films I have ever seen.
I honestly think this is probably the worst studio film I've seen in at least a decade, maybe more.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I forgive me because I don't remember who did it, but someone on our Facebook page put a GIF. It said, Brian trying to say nice things about Madame Web. And it was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man when he's using all the webs to try to stop that train. And he's like grimacing his face. Yep. I was like, oh no. Yeah. I mean, look, this movie's a disaster and I have no interest in picking on it. I have every interest in dissecting it because there is a lot to examine here. I mean, for starters, that gentleman who had the baby with the stroller, when we were walking out together, he just looked at us and went, whoo. We all just started laughing.
It's one of those things where, this is something Roger Ebert talked about in a review. He reviewed a movie called Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. And it's about these explorers who find a dinosaur, a little baby dinosaur. So it's called Baby.
I have a vague memory of that. Okay.
Yeah, and I believe it starred William Catt from The Greatest American Hero. Anyway, I don't remember anything about the movie, but I remember from his review where he said it's a movie that's so bad that you start wondering what was going through the actors' minds when they were filming this.
Right.
And And that's what I felt many times while watching Madam Web. As this Dakota Johnson for most of this movie seems like actively checked out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't think there's any questioning what's going on through her mind. I think she's almost she can't hold it inside. I mean, she feels disinterest.
I mean, clearly she signed on for something, and I'm like, is at what will we see on screen the moment when the realization hit that, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
No, yeah, like the day her agent was like, no, I didn't say MCU.
Yeah,
yeah,
I said SCUM.
Right.
Now here's the thing about Madam Web. Okay, Brian, this is the problem.
Mhm.
Okay, Madam Web, the character,
Yes,
who she appeared in the comics in the early 80s. She's an old blind lady in a wheelchair who can predict the future. So she'll like telepathically contact Spider-Man and be like, Spider-Man, you got to go over there because like the Sandman is waiting for you, or something like that. Okay. So she is the comic book equivalent of like an NPC in a video game, a non-playable character.
Okay.
And so the fact that Sony took a look at their list of characters that are covered under the Spider-Man license, and some executive, I'm going to say, chewed up stogie in one hand, big grubby finger in the other, just kind of points at a list. He's like, Madam Web, that sounds good. That sounds Spider-Man-y.
Yeah.
And whoever was in the room was like, okay, I guess that's what we're doing. I picture Roger Myers with
Junior.
That the voice, Alex Rocco voice, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and I mean, this is a character who, put simply, should never have been the center of a movie. And I'll say, Brian, you have a thing. You're like, I can see the good version and the bad version. I'm going to say there is no good version of that character's backstory because the character is fundamentally uninteresting as anything other than, hey, Spider-Man, you got to go there. And you know what? I don't need 2 hours of how she was born and how he hated her mom and whatever. I don't need any of that.
No, I agree. I think the only reason this exists is so Sony can hang on to the Spider-Man IP.
Yeah.
And without getting into spoilers, we will. It just begs too many questions.
Yeah.
Related to the Spider-Man movies. Because then you're like, wait, but if this, then why that? Like it accidentally, opens up all these things where I'm like, what? Then that doesn't make any sense in this case, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, and to what end? Right? At the end of the day, like, we don't accomplish anything by the end of this movie, except make everything more confusing in hindsight,
Yeah.
So I will say this. I wanted to have something positive to say about this. I did actually, I didn't, I don't need to, but I said this to you after we watched the movie. I said, you know what? This is an interesting thing to have a character who was a foster kid, has a complicated feelings about her mother, who is forced then to become sort of a foster mother to these other girls who feel kind of unwanted. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a moment where, I'm not too worried about side spoilers or something, but where Dakota Johnson's character has some sort of revelation about her mother, like learns something new about her she didn't realize and has a feeling about that. And I turned to you, I was like, that's the best part of the movie. I actually felt something.
Yeah.
So, there's something kind of interesting there. I could see a couple Post-it notes on a board and go, okay, I could see why you thought maybe you could build something around this and find a movie, but man, like they didn't have it and they should have scrapped it. Like that, those Post-it notes weren't enough.
No, well, that's the thing, I mean, it really feels like there was a game effort to be like, what can we turn this into? But to me, ultimately, what it comes down to is if you strip out all the comic book elements, what are you left with? And I would say probably a stronger movie.
Yeah, totally. Right? I mean, if this was just about a woman who could see a little bit into the future, like I said, a woman who doesn't like people, who accidentally becomes the caretaker of 3 teens who don't understand that they're going to become powerful people, but she has the ability to see in the future. That's interesting. Sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that little thread kind of works. I don't think it helps to have those helpless teens played by 26-year-olds. That's a problem. Having them behave like 15-year-olds while they are clearly 26. That's weird.
Yeah. There was a little bit of like Chris O'Donnell in Batman Forever syndrome going on, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, yeah, we'll keep going. I could, so many things to say. Yeah.
Look, the movie's terrible. It's borderline irredeemable. If you want to know what we think, it's a thumbs down from the both of us.
And you know why too? It's just badly made. I'm so surprised at the craft is so bad, and like
or lack thereof. Yeah.
Yeah, like, and I'm hesitant to blame the director because doing my research, she's directed some of like the best episodes of Succession and many other, great television and stuff. So it really does feel like a too many cooks situation.
I think honestly,
yeah.
I think, sorry, just to interject. I think she got completely steamrolled by the studio.
Yeah.
And it's a crying shame because this is her feature debut, and I don't know if she'll get another at bat, and I don't think it's entirely her fault. Just the steaming turd that this thing turned out to be.
No, I mean, this really does feel like there was something on a table and there was like 10 people standing around with scissors and tape and just working over, like Apollo 13, like here's what we got to work with. This has to be done by this date. God help us all. And like,
we got to make the thing for this fit into the thing for that using only this.
Dude, that's this movie.
It really is. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm talking like, I knew we were in trouble when the movie opened and it was Johnson's character's mother, Webb. It's her name, right? It's actually Webb. Her mother is in the Amazon researching spiders before she died.
Yeah.
And when things start going a little south, the camera starts doing these weird faux documentary handheld, like zoom ins and zoom outs, kind of like The Office, where it's still supposed to look like a documentary. But I don't know this for certain, but I would put money they did not do that in camera. It looked so unnatural that it felt like something they did in post.
Yeah.
And there was a couple other shots where it felt really weird, like that early 2000s extreme aesthetic, where it's like cameras were sort of spinning in circles and going down streets randomly before moving on to another shot. And it almost felt like the executives, or I don't know who to blame, but someone watched it and said, this movie isn't kinetic enough. And the last, they were sipping from a Four Loko and they were like, it needs more extreme shots, like people like when stuff zooms in all of a sudden, and then so they did it in the edit bay and it looks worse than what you're thinking right now. And so I was like, oh, this was like fudged with in post. This was like, yeah. So, I mean, yes, the story is bad and we'll get into the details of that, but like, I couldn't believe the actual, like, sometimes the editing and doing the ADR.
Oh, the ADR is on a whole other level of like just audacity.
The villain. I said this to you after the movie. If for some reason there's a gun to my head and I have to watch this movie again, I would love to do the math of how much dialogue the villain says that is actually seen with his moving lips, because everything he says, almost, I would bet 85% of his lines are ADR. They are mostly with his mouth off screen. So that already feels weird and like a disconnect. And then it'll like, sometimes you will see his lips, like the camera will pass past him and it looks like he's not saying what he's saying. Like clearly the plot or the whatever, his motivations changed and they just tried to fix the whole thing through ADR, and it leaves for this really wacky, ineffective villain. Yeah.
You want to talk spoilers?
Let's do it.
Spoilers.
So the movie starts out, and we have Constance Webb, right? She's played by Carrie Bichet,
Yeah.
and she's Cassandra Webb's mother. Oh, by the way, Cassandra, and she can see the future. Boy, that's convenient, isn't it? I hate like weird coincidences like that. That annoys me. But anyway, so she's researching spiders in the jungle. And why is she doing this? Because of all the cures and everything they can find, right? Now, later on, we find out that the reason she's doing this is because she has she's pregnant with a child who has a a muscular condition, right? Which is what ends up happening. Now, here's the thing. So she ends up, giving birth. She dies, and the daughter is born. We'll talk about all of that in a second. And she grows up hating her mom. Like, why did she go off into the jungle and do all this? She should have been safe and give birth to me. And then there's like that moment where she has like the vision of like what happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's my thing. Her mother has detailed notebooks about everything she's been doing, which Cassandra has.
Oh,
You're telling me she didn't write my baby has this disease?
So that's why I'm going to Peru.
Wouldn't that be something you would write down somewhere?
I can't believe I didn't even think of that.
Right?
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. She has all of her work, and there's a scene of her poring over it. And then she even says, like, I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, this is what I'm saying. I hate when movies hopscotch over logic like this.
Right.
Now, granted, logic left the station a while ago. So the hell am I doing? Because there's, for me to get hung up on this, but the whole idea, this drives me nuts, and I hate it. I hate this attempt to create a universe of spider characters.
Yes.
Around Spider-Man, who is ultimately, he's an everyman character, and what works is that he's just an average kid who ended up having this thing happen, and it changed his life and everything, right? And when you say no, there's like this whole lineage and a Spider-Verse, if you will, that annoys me. I think the Spider-Verse films have actually tackled it quite well with the idea that it's across different realities. But this film is like, no, there's like spider people. What are they called? Las Arañas, right?
I don't remember, but that sounds
right. But they're in the Peruvian jungle, and they have like spider powers, and they have like weird webbing patterns on their bodies and red paint. They look just like Spider-Man. Wow, that's weird, isn't it?
See, and so you're left to think like the movies that I already love. So it's like, so that radioactive spider that bit Peter Parker and leads him to create a suit that looks exactly like, the way that the people in this culture are dressed just happens to be the most insanely specific coincidence in human history.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like it undoes the movies we love.
Yeah. Well, and the bad guy Ezekiel is wearing like a Spider-Man costume.
Yes, years before not years, a year-ish before Peter Parker is born. He already a spider costume that looks like his exists already.
I mean, like the day Peter is born.
The day, right? You're right. Yeah, that's right.
But I can't take credit for that. I saw somebody post this online where it's like, the people in the Madam Web universe when Spider-Man first shows up after this has happened, and it's like the pictures from T2 where it's like the T800 from 1984, and then now,
dude, that's funny. But it's so true, and it's like, what? It's just so unnecessary, And
it's unnecessary because like so Cassandra's EMT partner is, look, it's Ben Parker. What are the odds of that, right? And I will say one of the good things, Adam Scott, who plays Uncle Ben, I think he's far better than the movie would warrant. I think he's actually giving some life in his performance. However, and I can see him like a little older being Uncle Ben. You know what I mean? Which I think
100%, 100%.
Right?
Yep.
But like the first scene in the movie, in like the present day, which is 20 years ago, they're in an ambulance and it's being like shot at and whatever, and he's like, man, I when I got out of the military, I didn't think I'd see gunfighting or something like that. And she's like, what, you don't think you can get shot in Queens? See, because it's funny because he's Uncle Ben and he gets shot in Queens, right?
Yeah, that's how he dies. Like,
I was like, dude, too soon.
I'm like, am I supposed to laugh at that?
I was like, it hasn't happened yet, but too soon.
I mean, yeah, like that doesn't make me feel good.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then okay, so the Ezekiel character. By the way, worth mentioning, the Ezekiel character was created by J. Michael Straczynski. The guy who created Babylon 5, right?
Okay.
And he had a run writing Spider-Man comics about 20 years ago. He had a pretty long run, 6-7 years. And so he introduced Ezekiel and this idea of like a spider totem and, that it's like a legacy that's passed on. And I hated it back then. I thought it was stupid.
Yeah.
I hate adding mysticism to Spider-Man's backstory. I think that's needless. And so I really hate that this movie leaned into it. But so he has this vision, okay? So he stole the mystical, the magic spider, whatever, and he has this vision that at some point in the future he's going to be murdered by these 3 girls who are spider women, right?
Yes.
Now, here's the thing about this, okay? The movie does not explain at all. Like, doesn't it seem like that's a thing where you see it from his perspective, and then at some point you double back and you're like, well, this is what actually happens.
Wait. What do you mean? Explain.
The vision is just them showing up in his house and just straight up murdering him.
Yeah.
The movie never answers that.
Right.
It never, like, we meet those characters in the year, but we never come back to, well, what happened there? What's the story there?
I know that should have been the ending of the movie,
right?
Yeah,
or some version of because
that gets twisted. Yeah, it's like Minority Report, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
right. Because it again. We're left with the idea that by film's end, one day these people will become superheroes. Who are they, by the way? We don't know. What are their names? What are their superhero names? The movie doesn't tell you. How do they get their powers? Doesn't matter. One day they're going to be superheroes. Well, who gives a crap?
Yeah, right.
But we do know for certain that but for Madam Web, they would have murdered the shit out of Ezekiel. We know that.
Right.
Boy, just the 3 of them together, just murdering.
You know what was so funny to me? I thought what you were about to say was he is anticipating these 3 young women, because of a vision he had, and he's like, and they look like this, and he has a computer screen with renderings that are someone artist created from him describing these people from his vision, and they are like headshots of Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, and Celeste O'Connor. Headshots.
It gets better. He describes them as he saw them in his vision, and they're adults, and then they're like, but this is what they'd look like 10 years younger.
Oh, that's right.
Which takes stupid and just straps booster rockets on it.
Yeah.
By the way, the woman that he seduces, the NSA woman, that's Jill Hennessy. I did not recognize her.
No, wait, sorry. Who's Jill Hennessy?
Jill Hennessy. Remember that TV show Crossing Jordan?
I remember its existence.
If you Googled her, like she used to be on Law and Order and stuff, I did not recognize her at all. But that's even weirder to me because she's like she's enough of a name where you'd think she'd have more than a nothing part, which tells me that there's probably more of her that got cut out.
Yeah, she's like an NSA agent, and he basically plays keep away with his playbill at an opera, and she's like, "Okay, I'll go home with you." It's so bad. But no, his whole motivations too are so weird. Like he keeps saying, he doesn't want to die, obviously, but he's also like, they'll destroy everything I've built.
Yeah.
And
what have you built?
What has he built? We don't know who this guy is. Like he literally is just insert bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we do not know anything of his business, and maybe he did explain it. Maybe that's what he was actually saying, but we don't know that because they changed all of his dialogue, all of it.
Oh, it's it's. I mean the idea, because in his vision he's like, my spider is missing. Right? Remember that?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, maybe that's something essential, but really that doesn't factor into it at all either.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Like maybe he needs to be constantly exposed to the spider to give him his powers. I don't know, something, right? Nothing. And then there's this thing where, using our 2003 technology, we've somehow figured out who these three women are. And the woman in the chair is like, she's getting on the train. She's getting on the train. She's getting. Wow, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
To which I say, yes. Tell me, like, what reason there is for this. Movie doesn't explain it.
Not at all. No.
And there is. Why are they all getting on the train? Isn't that? She's like, what a weird coincidence. It's like, yeah, you can't hang a lampshade on that unless you explain it.
Unless there's a reason. There actually is a reason in the movie world. Yeah.
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 So weird.
Yeah.
And then notice we haven't even talked about Madam Web because she truly is the least interesting character in a movie of uninteresting characters, let me say.
Yeah.
But it's more of a problem when the movie is about her.
Yes.
We've talked about this before. Dakota Johnson, I hear tell she's a good actor. I don't have evidence of that based on what I've seen.
I have not seen a lot. I have to admit, yes, I have not seen a lot of her work. But yes, I'm not saying the script's doing any favors, but yeah, all I'm getting from this, and I mean this, and I'm not trying to be funny, like it just looks like she doesn't want to be there. That's the sense you get in every single scene that she's in.
Well, and this is the thing, because you have an opportunity with this character where you say, okay, she's standoffish or whatever, but there's an arc that she's going on. You kind of alluded to that, right? Like the movie ends with her having she's been blinded and she's been stricken by this muscular disease. And now she is the Madam Web of the comic books. Does that mean anything to anybody watching? Not really, because it's not like this is a particularly iconic character, right? But the movie could have pointed us in that direction where maybe you start out like she's having visions of being crippled or something. Totally. And she's terrified, or she's having visions of not being able to see something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe she even thinks like, I see myself, in a chair and I feel like I'm alone or something like that. But then she realizes like, oh, the chair gives her power. She's not alone. She's got these three women that are like her best friends now. And she, like kind of subvert some vision she didn't understand or something, but no.
Nothing like that.
Nothing.
And so there's nothing at the end to signify like she's making a choice. So she's making a sacrifice, and it's moving her into something that she doesn't understand. But then we realize, oh, okay, this is her destiny. This is why she's a hero. Well, and I'm not saying that would have made the film any more compelling, but it would have at least given a sense of cohesion to her storyline.
Yes.
Whereas the problem is the three Spider Women. So we've got Julia Cornwall in the film. She's Carpenter in the comics. She's played by Sydney Sweeney. What's her name? Spider-Woman, Maddie Franklin, Celeste O'Connor, and then Aranya, played by Isabella Merced. So they are three tangentially Spider-Man connected characters. Mm-hmm. But to the best of my knowledge, they're not particularly connected to each other. Beyond that, again, this idea of like, oh, it's like a team of web people. At the 30 seconds before the credits come up.
Right.
I mean, the movie doesn't say, well, how will they end up getting their powers? We don't.
Right. That's a really great question.
It seems kind of important.
I just kind of took it for granted. I was like, got it. They're going to be Spider-Women. I got it.
Right. But like, that seems kind of important to me.
Yeah. No, all of them did a perfectly fine job. They were cast. I understand why they were cast. They were great. Truly. Especially I've been sort of hit or miss with Sydney Sweeney. I've seen her hit sometimes, seen her miss some other times. Mm-hmm. But I thought she was pretty good playing this kind of sweet, quiet girl.
I agree with that.
But it's just funny because they're supposed to be these kind of young, like they've been sort of left behind by their families. They feel neglected, but they're still, so they're young enough to feel sort of abandoned in the world, but be sort of act like teenagers and whatever. But I just never bought it because they look too old. I think if it had cast a little bit younger, I would have felt more of a need for Cassandra to take care of them.
That's right.
And so there's this sequence too where she leaves them alone in the woods. And she's like, "Stay here for 3 hours. I'll be back," said the stranger, to these people. And then they go into this diner and they hear this song, and then they just start like dancing on a table. And I was like, I could maybe buy that if they were younger and sort of like immature, but I was just watching these women that look too old to be doing this. It just felt, even like the execution of it, the staging of it just felt so weird. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it sort of, the movie expects you to just glom onto their relationship, the relationship between Cassandra and the girls.
Yeah, because
that's what
I'll put. Yes,
right. Because the script requires it. And again, it's going back to what I said before. I think you take away all the superhero stuff and you say, here's a guy who has these visions that these 3 women are going to murder him.
Mm-hmm.
And he decides to track them down when they're teenagers through some mystic means. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And this woman who somehow has gotten these flashes of clairvoyance is trying to protect them. Isn't that just sounds like an interesting idea to me?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Going back to the table dancing scene, I actually did like the Britney Spears song as a device. Like,
yes,
they're dancing to this song. Dakota Johnson gets a flash forward of them dancing around to that song, and then she hears the song starting on the radio. That's your ticking clock. As long as that song's playing, she knows she has time to get to them. I was like, that's really good. Like, so, I mean, credit where credit's due. I thought that was a really good device.
Okay, well, there's one thing.
But yeah, then the villain comes in wearing a Spider-Man suit, which to my mind, and honestly, to my canon, hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah. Here's another thing that bugs me. I don't like when you have characters exposit to nobody.
Oh man, well then this is not the movie for you.
Oh boy, she does a lot of that.
A lot. Yeah.
When her powers are first being tested, like there's like a bird that flies into the window, and then like it's like turns out it's just a flash forward, and then now she's experiencing it again. So this time she opens the window, and the bird comes in. So it didn't, and she goes, "The bird didn't die this time." And I'm like, thanks, appreciate you clarifying that. I was worried for a second.
I think I mentioned to you, the movie at that point already had been like, oh, this movie's kind of dumb, and like talking down to me. And what I was so impressed with was she's staying at home. Oh, this is really funny too, right? Where she's talking to Uncle Ben. I'm just calling him Uncle Ben. And she's like, look, I'm just going to go home and watch Idol. Right? Because it's like, she might as well say, like, I'm going to go home. It's the year 2003. Because who else would say that? But anyway, so then later this doctor prescribes for her to like go home, and she says, go home and watch some old movies. And I thought she was going to say like, just go home and watch Idol. I thought that would have been funny if every character
it's just a runner throughout.
Yeah. But anyway, so she goes home and she's watching A Christmas Carol, which I found weird because
at the end, by the way, it'd be funny when Ezekiel is killed. It'd be like, I won't get to finish Idol.
Yeah, I'll never know who finishes.
Yeah.
I'm an Aiken man myself. So she's watching A Christmas Carol, which is weird because it doesn't seem like it's Christmas time. I just thought that was weird. It would be on TV. And
that is true.
But what the movie does, and I'll give it a pass for this, because Scrooge then gives this exposition when he's talking to the Ghost of Christmas Future or whatever. He's just like, oh, this is the future that could be. Kind of like the future's not written. It can be changed. And that line of dialogue from the movie is happening as she's figuring out the pigeon. The fact that she can open the window. The future doesn't have to be the pigeon hitting the window. She can open the window. It can come in. And I thought, wow, that's really clever to use that movie's exposition and have her have that realization.
Yeah.
And then she went and goes and says the line like, if I open the window, the pigeon gets to live. And I was like, oh, movie. Like,
I said this to you afterwards. I was like, one of the best pieces in Sam Raimi's 2002 Spider-Man is when Peter has the realization of his powers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all conveyed just based on the look on his face. He glances over at a spider web. And it's just, and we're like, yeah, no, he's figuring it out. We're not stupid. We're able to figure it out. Right.
Yep.
And I'm like, I think audience expectations are pretty standard. I don't think they've devolved that much in 21 years where you need the character to just exposit. So just out there, you know what I mean? Talking like a movie character.
Well, it's funny. You pulled that scene up from the Sam Raimi movie.
Yeah.
Where Peter is like, wait a minute. But yeah, slowly figuring out, sees the spider web, looks at his fingers, kind of touches the wall, realizes it sticks, goes up. And it's this revelation we're experiencing with him. And it's done so well and visually. And in this movie, she's like, wait, if I have the powers of a spider, she's like, well, one wouldn't know they couldn't climb a wall if they didn't try. I think that's almost literally what she says. And then she like turns to the wall and kind of jumps and then falls on the ground. And it's like, it just feels like someone would try that if they had seen the movie Spider-Man.
That's exactly it, right? There's no Spider-Man in this universe.
Yeah, no.
Ugh. Okay.
Well, speaking of...
Hold on. So I went into the theater and I had two thoughts. I was like, number one, because I knew people were comparing it to a early 2000s superhero movie. And I was like, I'll bet you there's going to be like voiceover narration throughout, and then it'll end in like this, triumphant restatement of purpose. And I was like, that's going to annoy me. And then number two, I was like, they're going to find some way to cram in with great power comes great responsibility, and I'm going to lose my shit. And like 2/3 of the way through, Cassie, she goes to Peru and she finds out her hidden history or whatever. And she's like, she meets some like Zen spider master guy, and she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do or something like that. And he's like, well, the responsibility, or when you know the responsibility, the power will come to you, or something like that.
Yeah. I looked it up. It says, when you take on the responsibility, great power will come.
Okay, so here's what happened, and Brian is my witness. Out loud at normal volume, like this right here, I was like, F you.
Yeah. It's true.
I was so mad. And then, so now we went through 2/3 of the movie easily, and I was like, well, there's no voiceover throughout, so I guess we dodged that bullet. Couldn't freaking dodge that bullet either, Brian.
Nope.
Because they had to sneak that in at the end, didn't they? Oh, they sure did.
Yes, they did.
How effing dare you, movie? How dare you give Madam Web the "Who am I? I'm Spider-Man" thing at the end? Yep. Oh, it made me so mad, Brian.
Dude, I mean, there were so many. You brought up something that was really funny to me too. That where she was like, she told the girls, she's like, all right, I have to go to Peru to solve something.
Yep.
Right. And then she basically like leaves Peru and is like back in New York in the same day. We're like, that's not how travel works.
So weird, right?
And then
here's another thing. This is another thing that bugged me earlier in the train scene. The train is like almost empty. There's plenty of open seats.
Yeah.
And this dude comes. He sits right next to her. He's like, "Hey, is this the train that's going to like wherever?" And she's like, "No," or something like that. Yeah. And again, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. Nobody would do that.
It was awkward staging. He could have sat one seat away from her and it would have played the exact same way. Actually, no, it would have played more like human behavior. Yeah.
Human behavior. That's my problem, right? Right. Because that's the stuff that takes me out of it. I'm like, people don't act like that. People don't react like that.
No. And then when she, is in, she encounters him again, right? And he's like still asking her questions. And I was like, that guy needs help. I'm like worried about that guy.
Yeah.
He's a weird character. He just seemed very confused. I don't know. Dude, we joke a lot about Chekhov's fill in the blank, something that's introduced and the Chekhov's gun principle. If you introduce a gun in the first act, it has to go off by the third act. And in this one, immediately when she's bonding with the girl, she's like, I'm going to teach you CPR. I was like, oh, gee, you think CPR is going to factor into the conclusion?
Chekhov's compressions are about to come in.
And the funniest part to me is because then you have these three young women and you need them all to contribute to the conclusion, right? So basically she's like, okay, here's how you do CPR. You go, compression, 1, 2, 3. And if you get tired, you can switch off. You just have to keep the rhythm the same. And now you try. And then they're flawlessly cycling through it. And so then at the end, of course, when Cassandra is knocked out or whatever, and the girl's like, we need to do that CPR thing she taught us 20 minutes ago. And so, but you need them all 3 to do it, right? So it's so awkward where the first girl's like, 1, 2, getting a little tired, guys. So then the second one's like, wait, I got you. We that's the thing. We have to keep a cycle. 3, 4, 5. Ooh, getting a little winded. And the third one's like, so they can all 3 do CPR. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have anything else written down about this movie?
You know what? I've seen a lot about the Pepsi sign. People complain about the Pepsi sign and I'm like, you know what? That exists. So I'm not actually going to hold that against the movie, because I actually like when movies put action set pieces on places that actually exist, because then when I see them in real life, I'm like, oh, neat. That's where Wolverine was dangling off of that. That's fun for me. But the problem was the whole action sequence was so badly staged. The geography made no sense. Like I couldn't even tell what was going on. And so it ended up being, and it was fun. Okay. So there's like all these boxes filled with fireworks or something, like I think they were fireworks. And so the way that they're setting up to make chaos later is they're sticking flares into these boxes of fireworks. But it just feels like that would immediately set them off, right? But it's like, no, they just kind of go off when the movie dictates they should go off.
It's a movie time.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of wild.
With regards to the Pepsi thing, I mean, obviously it's the result of like a licensing agreement or a product placement, right?
Yeah.
Because it's very obvious, like, here, Cassie, drink a Pepsi,
Yes.
But then it makes me wonder, did Pepsi know that like their sign was going to be used to just like kill a guy?
That's a good point.
Did they sign on for that?
I don't know. I didn't even
It would have been funny if like the P sign just falls on him and it's just like Pepsi, the choice of a new generation. And then we just go to credits.
Actually, I would have loved if the Pepsi's, and then the girls are like, that Pepsi sign just killed a guy. And then you see her slowly raise a Coke into frame and crack it open. You're like, oh, Coke was the sponsor. What a twist.
What a twist.
Directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Now, I would have loved that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a mess. It's not a fun mess. Somebody was like, "Is this so bad it's good?" I had a couple people ask me, and I said, honestly, don't encourage them. That's really where my head's at when it comes to this.
Dude, I literally turned to you at one point and I said, it was after like a really bad ADR scene where it was like a dance, probably the editor sweating bullets trying to make the ADR fit within the footage they had, not showing the character's mouth, so they're speaking faster than they normally should. And I leaned over to you and I said, this is like The Room. This is like that movie, The Room. And then you and I afterwards, we were watching some sort of like online critic talking about it. And he was like, it reminds me of The Room. I was like, hey, that's what I said. Like I that's a pretty harsh criticism, but like, yeah, I'm glad to know I was not alone in thinking that. Though that said, the whole movie is not like The Room. This is not going to become, in my mind, I don't think this is going to become
I agree.
sort of midnight thing because it's not fun enough,
Yeah, exactly. It's just too much of a mess, I think, unfortunately.
It's just a kind of fascinating that like a major studio, $100 million plus movie could come out this broken.
I mean, I want to get the full, the unvarnished telling of how this thing ended up what it is.
Yeah, and an IP that is so vital to them. I mean, then this was potentially going to set up many more movies with these characters.
The thing, I don't know how many reviews were like another low for the MCU, which you just know Kevin Feige's just throwing shit in his office when you read stuff like that.
Right.
But I read a thing, I think it was in Hollywood Reporter. It's like, oh, you're not going to see another Madam Web movie for another 10 years. I'm like, only 10? That's rather optimistic,
Right.
Apparently they had big plans of launching a franchise, which what kind of drunk ass people are making decisions at this studio?
Dude, I'm sure that's the first post that they put up on the board, and then they drew the arrows backwards to try to feel like, all right, now how do we do that?
Yeah, it's
It
It's
is as
something, all
bad as
right.
you're hearing if you haven't seen it.
It is. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, I don't know what else we can really say beyond that.
Yeah.
You know. Uh, but I'm happy to leave it there unless you have anything else to add.
No, that's about it.
There we go. Madam Web, it is bad.
Yep.
You don't need to see the future. We predicted that. We predicted that a while ago.
Yeah, you kind of got the sense from the trailer. It was like,
Got the sense it
but
wasn't
from
gonna.
the trailer, I was
add
getting
up
a
too
sense
much.
that it might be a little unhinged, and I was kind of looking forward to that.
Sure.
But not the right kind of unhinged.
Here's the thing. We got later this year, speaking of Sony and their Spider-Man wannabe spin-offs, we got Kraven the Hunter coming out in August.
Oh, dude, I couldn't even muster the attention through the trailer for that.
Right. It's baffling to me that you would give that character his own movie instead of making him a villain in a Spider-Man movie. What are you doing?
I don't know, man.
It's insanity, you know? It's like doing a Green Goblin movie without Spider-Man, you know? No, what are you doing?
Actually, that could possibly work because we know who that is.
Well, not Norman Osborn because he's a bad guy, but there was a character in the comics called Phil Urich, who briefly found the Green Goblin's old stuff and he took it on and he became like a good guy Green Goblin. Do that. I mean,
that's kind of interesting. How did they not choose that first?
Yeah, odd, right?
I like that.
Yeah, again, I don't want to give Sony any ideas, but my point is, like Kraven, he's best known for having almost killed Spider-Man. So it's like, yeah, let's just do a whole movie about him. Brilliant.
Right.
Ridiculous. And then there's Venom 3, which is coming out in November. So Sony is doing everything possible to clog the toilet for Marvel.
Right.
I mean, seriously, right?
But they're gonna. They'll let go of that Spider-Man IP out of their cold dead hands. I mean, they're.
Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, if they have to sacrifice, legions of films to keep Spider-Man, then that's what they'll do. Yeah.
So help them, they'll do it.
Because they don't need them to be successful; they just need to release them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, it's like cost of doing business. I think it's all about like, how much money do they make out of Spider-Man annually and then just subtract however much these things cost.
Yep.
Jeez, ridiculous. All right. Well, anyway, I'm sure we'll be back. And by the way, you know what? Look, seriously, I would love to come back and talk about Kraven the Hunter. Be like, well, hey, that was not the worst thing in the world. I would love that. Am I optimistic? No, but that too, it's a good director. So I if nothing else, I hope that they don't shit all over him like they did S.J. Clarkson.
I agree. I mean, that's the sense I'm getting from this. I like a real disarray.
Yep.
Behind the scenes of this, creating, and we are. Sometimes you can hide the chaos and like a miracle happens and a good movie pops out.
A Rogue One, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, but this one, I hire a director, let them have a take and let them make the movie. Like, what's the worst? We've seen what can happen. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Let someone with a point of view tell their story, and I don't know. Honestly, you know what? It made me think. It made me appreciate the superhero films that do work. And I know that sounds so simple to say, but like I thought of like Spider-Man No Way Home. That movie's nuts. Like that movie has so many moving parts. It is like stuffed. And it has like an emotional story in there also, and like multiverses and whatever, and everyone needs like an arc. And I think it's like sometimes easy to like take for granted that a movie like that comes together at all. Like movies aren't written in the stars. You know what I mean? Like every movie starts with the same blank page. And then after blood, sweat, and tears, they become something that feels so good. It feels like it was inevitable. And that's just not true. It just takes a lot of hard work. And so seeing something that just was broken out of the box, I look at something like, No Way Home or whatever, like, where Endgame ended up and all these things. Like, that took a lot of work, and it makes me appreciate those successes even more,
Yeah. Well, there you go. I think that's actually a great place to leave this conversation. So, of course, if anybody listening, if you've seen Madam Web and you disagree with our take, boy, do we want to hear that.
Yeah, I really would. I really would love to hear from.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to hear everybody's experience with it. I'm very curious.
I don't think this will be something comparable to Mark McGee and going to see Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Not quite the same thing.
Prove us wrong. No.
That's right. But if you do want to reach out to us, you can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. If you're looking for me online, I'm on social media at Zacky's Corner. That's ZAKIS Corner. I'm still posting at X, despite the fact that it has objectively become a bad place. A worse place, I should say. But I'm elsewhere too. Brian, the smarter of the two of us, is not on social media actively, and he is thus a much healthier person mentally.
I just could never find my way onto it. I didn't know how I existed on there, and I can't say I miss it.
Well, you did all right. So, my review of the Last Airbender, the Avatar: The Last Airbender series is up at the San Francisco Chronicle, so check that out. That show just premiered today as we are recording this, and certainly I know that some of our listeners are fans of that show, so I'd love to have you check that out. Brian, you have anything out there that people can look at?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but new episodes of Young Jedi Adventures just dropped on Disney Plus and are getting doled out, I believe, on Disney Junior. So go check those out.
Very cool. Very cool. With that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been Movie Film 285. We'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends, it's the Movie Film Podcast. Enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about movies. Movie Film Podcast on the radio.